Hey everybody, I'm Joe. We're talking about Marvel Multiverse and we're doing another character build. Here we go. I have had this one on the to-do list for quite some time. It all comes from a little writer that is in the description of size, which I've mentioned, but I haven't really talked about too much. Specifically this, when you are a different size from average, it affects your melee and agility defense scores, right? So every size larger you are than average, your melee and agility defense scores decrease by 1. But every size you are smaller than average, your melee and agility defense scores increase by 1. So in other words, if I want to build a character that's incredibly hard to hit, one of the easiest ways to do it is actually just by shrinking. And that's exactly what we're going to do. It's been a hot minute since I've built a tank on this channel before. So for people who have not seen previous tank builds, let me kind of tell you the way that it works. I believe in Marvel Multiverse. Marvel Multiverse currently does not have any powers which specifically give trouble to an enemy if they attack anybody other than you. In other words, there are no powers that really kind of force or taunt or encourage enemies to attack you as opposed to your allies. And that means that we don't have a way of really drawing that action economy towards us. A tank works in-game by reducing the effective action economy of the enemies, usually by having the enemies attack you, and you're very survivable, so it doesn't do anything, rather than attacking your allies who aren't as survivable. But notice that reducing action economy is, of course, the same thing as being a battlefield controller. Battlefield controllers work by reducing the action economy of enemies, and they do it through abilities rather than having enemies attack them. In Marvel Multiverse, there are ways of reducing enemy action economy, but there are not ways of having the enemy attack you. So in this game, building a tank typically means boosting your survivability and then having the battlefield control capacities as well. That's typically the way that we build them, at least here. That means in this game, a tank and a battlefield controller are one and the same. So today we're going to build a tank. We're going to create survivability by increasing our defense scores by becoming smaller. And then we're going to really increase the survivability of ourselves and our party by reducing action economy of the enemy. And that's going to be a lot of fun. I'm not that great at naming my characters, as you know, so if you have a better name, I would love for you to put it in the comments below, but I'll be calling today's character the Pocket Protector. I don't have a lot of opinion on the origin or occupation for this character. There's nothing that's going to be really critical, but I think going into Educator might be fun, so we're going to take that as our occupation. Educator means that we are an educator in some way, and we're going to have connections to the education community, but we also get some cool traits. We're going to get presence, font of information, and connections to community. Presence means that we have an edge on ego checks in order to get people to pay attention or voluntarily do things for us, which is cool. Font of information is one of the most open-ended traits in the game. We have an edge on logic checks having to do with knowledge, which is pretty interesting, right? And next, connections, of course, means that we are connected to a community and we know NPCs who can help us. Ours just says connections for community. This is assumed to be an educational community of some kind, but it's open-ended. You can flavor it however you and your narrator negotiate. Now, I do need to talk about the origin for this character. We're going into the magic power set, which means we have to pick up magic as an origin, and we're going to be picking up magic sorcery as our origin. And this just means that we are practiced in the arts of sorcery, which is pretty cool. All right, let's go ahead and do point buy. And I want to tell you that recently I did a video on should you do negative point buy. And it's important and lots of people do, some people do not, and that's totally fine. This character I think really does benefit from negative point buy, okay? And for me, I am going to do a -4 in melee. So let's talk about this, and I'll talk about how I would build the character without doing that. A -4 gives me the ability to have points in ego and agility, right? But also my survivability. Remember, it's a tank. I need high survivability, so I want a nice bonus to my hit points. You might decide to have better average scores but reduce some survivability, or your attacking benefit with ego. Both are logical ways to go. Here's how I did it though. -4 in melee, 1 point in agility, 3 points in resilience, that's 90 hit points right off the bat, 1 point in vigilance, and then 4 points in ego. This gives defenses with powers of 14 for melee and agility, 13 for resilience, and 11 for vigilance, 14 for ego, and a 10 for logic. If I was to do this without negative point buy, I would take 2 points away from my resilience, giving me only 30 points of health, so that's lower survivability. Or alternatively, take no points in agility, take 2 points in resilience, and then take away 2 points from ego. If I was to go that route, I would probably then wind up with defenses of 14 for melee and agility. Remember, I'm getting a +3 from my size, which is why the defense scores are 14, but the actual agility score is a 1. A resilience of a 1, which gives me 30 hit points. Vigilance of a 1, so 30 points of focus. And then 2 points in ego, which is a defense of 12 for ego and 10 for logic. So it's entirely up to you on the way that feels right for your character build. We need to go into the resize power set right away at rank 1, which lets us take the grow or shrink powers. Now I've used grow before, most recently in the slugger, which grew to a large size and made his baseball bat into a large size and started swinging them at people. But we're going to be going into the shrink powers here. So we're going to pick up shrink 1 and 2. Shrink 2 means that we are tiny in size, which is about 4 inches tall. And that means that we get a +3 to our melee and agility defense scores. So of course we love that. Next, we're going to take Discipline 1. We are going to need ego on this character. And so Discipline 1 gives us either a +1 to our damage multiplier when we use an attacking power that attacks with ego, or it gives us a +1 to any ego-based check, which is also going to be useful for us. Lastly, we're going to pick up evasion, which is what gives us a higher melee defense. It allows us to use our agility defense in place of our melee defense. The trait I'm going to take is Battle Ready. Battle Ready, of course, gives me 30 points of focus in addition to what I get through my vigilance score. And we're going to be using quite a bit of focus starting at the next rank. And so this is just nice for us to have. If this is your first tank build with us here, here's what I try to rank. I try to rank my average defense score. So I take all of my defense scores and I just average them into one number. And then I also try to see how many action economy points I can remove from the board. Remember that we assume that an enemy gets an action, a reaction, and movement. And so the question is, how many of those can I remove from enemies? Each one of those is worth 1 point or 1 action economy point. Additionally, when I have a power that affects multiple enemies, I always assume that the number of enemies affected is 3. So rank 1's pretty tough for us. Our average defense score is a 12.6, and we're not removing any action economy points, and we also don't have a great way of attacking our enemies. So rank 1's gonna kind of hurt a little bit. Hopefully we'll just get through it as fast as possible. Let's do point buy for rank 2. We're gonna bring agility to a 3, resilience to a 4, vigilance to a 2, and ego to a 5. This is going to give us defenses of 17 for melee and agility, 14 for resilience, 12 for vigilance, 15 for ego, and still a 10 for logic. I'm watching that wisdom power and I want it. Don't worry, I know it's there. We need to go into the magic power set right at this rank, but we've got some stuff that we really want first. First is going to be shrink 3 and 4. Shrink 4 means that we can now shrink to the size of 1/4 of 1 inch, about the size of an ant, and that means we get a 5 bonus to our melee and agility defense scores. It is nearly impossible to hit us we're using a melee or agility attack, and that's exactly what we're going for. Next, we're going to take Sturdy 1 for 1 damage reduction. I can never forget that this character is supposed to be a tank. We're gonna put down some punishing powers on the board, and we want enemies to attack us. And so I want them to have a hard time hitting us, and even if they do, I want to reduce that damage coming in. Sturdy powers are vital for this character. Next, we're going to take Images of Icon, and this is just so cool. I love this power. It costs only 5 points of focus, so we can do this almost as often as we want because we have a good amount of focus. And we need to remember that we are rank 2. So here's how Images of Icon works. We can create illusory duplicates of any character we have met, including ourselves, and we can make a number of duplicates equal to our rank. So right now, 2. These duplicates move and make noise and can pretend to attack. They just miss, right? Because they can't actually do damage. But critically, enemies have to try to attack them in order to figure out which one of you is real. So here's the way that I would use this. I would make illusory duplicates of my allies and have them fight alongside the real ones. And that means enemies are going to have to guess which one to attack. I'm not going to make a duplicate of myself because I want enemies to attack me. I'm going to be a tiny little guy for them to try to hit, which is going to be nearly impossible. Or I could literally be riding around in one of my allies' pockets. And that means that I'm not going to get hit almost ever, and my duplicates are going to protect my allies. So how does this work with action economy points? I'm going to assume that these guys each can absorb an attack and a reaction before they are destroyed. In other words, one attack hits, one attack would miss, and that means that each one absorbs 2 points of action economy. So that seems fair to me. And of course, if they get destroyed, I'm just going to summon them again with my next action because it only costs 5 points of focus. The trait I'm going to take here is Sneaky, which is going to give me an edge on any agility check in order to sneak and to hide. And since I'm a 1/4 of an inch tall, I kind of want to be hidden. I don't want the enemies to find me. I want them to just have trouble and see only my duplicates. So at this rank, we have an average defense score of 14.1, and that is assuming that we have shrank down to the smallest size possible, and we are going to be removing 4 action economy points from the board. Let's go ahead and do point buy at rank 3. We're going to bring agility to a 4, resilience to a 6, vigilance to a 3, and ego to a 6. This is going to give us defenses with powers of 19 for melee and agility, 16 for resilience, ego, and logic, and then a 13 for vigilance. We're going to pick up wisdom, as you saw just a second ago. This allows us to use our ego defense in the place of our logic defense when our logic is attacked. Next, we're going to take discipline 2. This is a 2 damage multiplier for any attacks using ego, or a +2 to any check that uses ego. We're going to be using this all the time, so we love it. We're going to pick up discipline 3, so now we get a +3 to the damage multiplier for any attack using ego, which we don't have yet, but also a +3 to any ego check, which I'm assuming that we're doing quite a bit. We're going to also take Sturdy 2. Sturdy 2 is going to give us a 2 damage reduction, and of course that is always beneficial. Next, we're going to take Mists of Munipore. This is pretty cool. I like this. It costs 5 points of focus. We create a thick fog up to 100 spaces per rank, and this is going to block all line of sight beyond 10 spaces and keeps people or creatures inside of it from flying, gliding, or web slinging, which means we are reducing the movement action economy of our enemies as well, which is pretty nice. So how should I calculate this for action economy purposes? Well, it's difficult to say, but I'm just going to assume that this has an adverse effect to the movement of 3 enemies, and that means we're going to have 3 action economy points taken away when we have this up and running. So here's the play for this character. We want our duplicates already going with us when we go into battle, and in our first action we're going to create Mists of Munipore. And remember, every rank we get additional duplicates. The trait we're going to take is Beguiling. This gives us an edge on any ego check with anyone that might find us attractive. We have a high ego score on this character. We might as well take some of the things that allow us to be a good face of the party, and Beguiling, of course, is very helpful. At this rank, we have an average defense score of 16.5, and we are going to be removing 9 action economy points from the board every round of combat. Let's go ahead and do point buy for rank 4. We're going to bring agility to a 6, resilience to a 7, vigilance to a 4, ego to a 7. This is going to give us defenses of 23 for melee and agility, 17 for resilience, ego, and logic, and 14 for vigilance. So how the heck did I get a 23 defense score for agility? Well, the answer is in spider powers. We don't want a lot out of spider powers, but we do want spider sense. Spider Sense is a permanent alteration to our character. It gives us an edge on initiative rolls, an edge on vigilance checks to perceive danger. Enemies have trouble on agility checks against our vigilance defense, and importantly for us, a +2 bonus to our agility defense. This is why this character had to boost agility as opposed to melee, because the Spider Sense power only boosts agility. And so we're getting a boost to agility, but because we have evasion, that is now going to count for attacks against our melee, which is going to be awesome. Next, we're going to take Discipline 4 for a 4 damage multiplier for any attack using Ego, which we still don't have, and a +4 to any Ego-based check, which we're probably doing all the time. Next, we're going to take Sturdy 3 for 3 damage reduction, and of course, we always love that. Next, we're going to take Dispel Spell, and this may not come up often, but it's so cool, I can't leave it on the table. This costs 15 points of focus, and we make an Ego check against the Ego defense of a target that is using a magical power that requires concentration. Please note that this is an Ego check, not attack roll, so the discipline bonus counts. On a regular success, the target's concentration on the power that we're specifically targeting is broken. On a fantastic success, they lose concentration on all powers. The downside, of course, is this is only for powers that are in the magic power set. So it won't come up all the time, but when it does, just being able to end the concentration on something is pretty stinking useful. The trait that we are going to take is Deal Maker. We have an edge on any action check that involves making deals. Something that, of course, is going to be an ego-based check, and we love that. At this rank, we're going to have average defense scores of 18.5, and we're going to be removing 11 action economy points from the board every round of combat. Let's go ahead and do point buy for rank 4. We're going to bring agility and resilience to an 8, vigilance to a 5, and ego to an 8. This is going to give us defenses of 25 for melee and agility, 18 for resilience, ego, and logic, and a 15 for vigilance. I have really everything I need out of the magic power set. There's cool stuff in there. You could take more, and I certainly wouldn't blame you. There'd be great stuff to pick up and grab. But if I want to make sure that my enemies just cannot hit my allies, that I'm defending us as incredibly well as possible, well, I'm going to go into the illusion power set. First thing I'm going to pick up is invisibility. It's exactly what it sounds like. I am now going to be able to become completely invisible. I have a character at my table who took this early on, and the capacities he has to be able to get in and out of situations, to eavesdrop, to pick up information are incredible. And it helps that he has phasing. We don't have phasing, but we have sneaky, and we're going to do just fine. Next, we're going to take Extend Invisibility. This allows us to make other things invisible. So it costs 10 points of focus, and now we can make some other object or person invisible. Next, we're going to take Group Invisibility. This costs 15 points of focus, but we can now make a group of people invisible. How many people, you ask? It is equal to our ego defense, so 18. Your party is definitely less than that. Next, we're going to take Shield of Seraphim. This costs 10 points of focus, and we can use it as a reaction. This is one of those powers that allows us to throw up a shield that can absorb a certain amount of damage. In this case, it's 20 points of damage. And sadly, it only is for us. We can't throw it onto our allies. It's kind of a shame, but that's okay. It's going to be all right. We can, as a reaction, throw up a shield that absorbs 20 points of damage. And even if the damage is larger than 20, none of it carries over. So this allows us to simply negate one attack against us. The trait we're going to take is Combat Reflexes. This gives us an additional reaction every round of combat. Our only real reaction is Shield of Seraphim, and we want people attacking us, and then we can just throw up the shield to protect ourselves, and now I can do that twice. Okay, so let's talk about all the ways we're protecting our allies. I assume we are going into battle invisible, but I have made illusory duplicates, meaning you see all of us walking, but all the people you see are illusory, and the real us is invisible nearby. Very, very cool moment. Okay, so how does this affect action economy? And it's difficult to say, because enemies are going to have to chew through my illusions, perhaps me making more illusions. My allies are all invisible. They're going to have to do so while in the midst of Munipore, and if they see me, I get to throw up the Shield of Seraphim twice. I'm going to say that since I can make 5 illusions, that each one of those removes an action and a reaction per every round of combat. The Mist of Munipore affects 3 enemies, as I always say, and I get 2 Shield of Seraphim reactions. Your action economy reduction might even be better than this, but it's going to be fantastic. At any rate, all that together, and we are removing 15 action economy points from the board, and our average defense score is a 19.8. Let's go ahead and do point buy for rank 6. We're going to bring agility to a 9, resilience to a 9, vigilance to a 7, ego to a 9. This is going to give us defenses of 26 for melee and agility, 19 for resilience, 19 for ego, 19 for logic, and 17 for vigilance. So we've got a lot of fun stuff to take for quality of life. Let's just pick up some fun stuff. First is a sturdy 4 for 4 damage reduction for all attacks coming in. Not that anything is hitting us anyway. Next, we're going to take flight 1, which is going to give us a flying speed equal to our rank times our running speed. And so this means you can be invisible and flying. And that means enemies are just almost never going to hit you. Though at this rank, running into flying enemies is pretty common, but they still have to find you invisible and in the air. Next, we're going to take combat trickery. This is going to allow us once per combat to simply turn the Marvel die over to a 1, and who doesn't love that? Next, we're going to take resize object. This allows us to touch an object and change its size to a size we can obtain with our grow or shrink powers. So since you can be invisible, you can walk into a space, touch something, shrink it down, put it in your pocket, and walk away and steal it. You are now the perfect thief. Next, we're going to take the Crimson Bands of Sidorak. This is really cool. It costs 10 points of focus, and we make an ego check, not attack roll, against an enemy that is within our line of sight. This is against their melee defense. Upon a success, we paralyze the target. Upon a fantastic success, they are also pinned. Breaking out of the Crimson Bands of Sidorak requires a melee check with a target number of 20. So this is just a single target, just battlefield control capacity, and it's a nice thing to kind of add and round out the character. The trait we're going to take is Pundit. We now have an edge on ego or logic checks that are made when giving our opinion via the media. Just another way to stack the edges that we get on ego checks. At this rank, we are going to have an average defense score of 21, and we are going to be removing 17 action economy points from the board every round of combat. All right, let's get into some final thoughts. I love this battlefield controller so much. I think that this is more effective than even the spider tank that I made a little while back, because here enemies are able to move, but they can't find me or my allies. I can reliably make my allies invisible, and I can reliably create duplicates of my allies so that enemies are wasting action economy on the duplicates. It is more reliable, I feel, than webbing powers are, even though webbing powers are quite good at battlefield control. Additionally, the defense scores I'm getting here are just insane. No one is going to hit this character with a melee or an agility attack, especially once I pick up Shield of Seraphim. I wish that I was able to use Shield of Seraphim for attacks against an ally, but even without that capacity, I still feel that this character defends allies really well and has just a bucket load of hit points. So people can attack me all day long, and even if they hit, I'm going to be okay. I love the way this character turned out. So how does this character stack up to other tank builds I've done? Well, the Spider tank had an average action economy point reduction of 14.5 because they got it online earlier. With this character, it's a 9.3, which puts this character kind of in the middle. It's better than Shelter from the Storm, but not quite as good as the Spider tank. But in terms of defense scores, this character blows everything else out of the water. The Spider tank had average defense scores of 15.6, and the Shelter from the Storm character had average defense scores of 15.4. Here we're at 17 average defense scores across the board, and that's just really cool to see. So much better defense scores, average action economy point reduction. I'll call this a really successful tank and battlefield control build.